Hey everybody, April Bowden here. I'm Road to Recovery at 8, and I'm also the co-host of my former talk show, Truther Talk. So y'all can find me there at truthertalk.com. So hey y'all, I'm doing this video. This is probably my last video for Vaccine Injury Awareness Month, or Autism Awareness Month, whatever the kids are calling it these days. This is probably my last video on this because we're getting close to the end of April, and I have 3 kids who I homeschool, and one of them is vaccine injured. So I really want to direct my energy there and not, doing this kind of work for a while, because it's hard to find the balance to do it. So anyway, it might be my last video. I don't know if I have another one in me, but I'm going to talk today about this interview that Tucker Carlson did with Robert Kennedy Jr. Now, a lot of people in the anti-vax movement, or the vaccine truth movement, or the autism movement, or whatever you want to call it, whatever the kids are calling it these days, have been real excited about the fact that Trump is bringing Robert Kennedy Jr. into the fray of government in order to perform vaccine safeties or what have you. But here's why I don't trust the guy. Now, he does this interview with Tucker Carlson a few days ago, and he's basically talking about a lot of the toxins and things that he's found doing his research into vaccines. And Tucker Carlson kind of says, oh, why aren't people giving credence to this side of the argument? And he says, oh, is it because people have come out that have been celebrities and they're completely anti-vax and they say crazy stuff like that? And he's kind of a snobby response, right? But Robert Kennedy said, well, maybe that's part of it, but, they just don't know the science and stuff like that. And he was kind of giving that response. And Tucker Carlson says, well, I think people, it's because of herd immunity, right? That's why we still need these vaccines. And Robert Kennedy doesn't really address that question. Is herd immunity a real science? Is there anything to base the science behind herd immunity? And let's, first of all, before you even get into herd immunity, do any of these vaccines work? So anyway, so Tucker Carlson, I don't think that I think he's just probably ignorant and doesn't necessarily know. He hasn't done the research on vaccines. I don't really know. I can't say what's in his head, but he's probably just doesn't know what he's talking about. Robert Kennedy, on the other hand, has been doing this research since at least 2005. Robert Kennedy got involved in this because he had done an article called Deadly Immunity, where he did a deep investigation into the use of thimerosal or mercury in vaccines. And what he found was that not only was mercury being used, which most people had no idea that was the case, but that it was causing neurological problems. And not only that, but the government was covering it up. So the fact that mercury was in vaccines in the first place, and they didn't suspect that there were going to be neurological problems, is a problem in and of itself, because they should have seen that coming, right? But let's assume they didn't. So Kennedy says, I've found that the government's implicit in this, and that this is horrible, and this shouldn't be in children's vaccines. And there was a congressman by the name of Dan Burton. Dan Burton also did an investigation for Congress, and he subpoenaed these records, and they found that they're the same thing, that basically not only were they using mercury in vaccines, but that they knew that it was causing autism and neurological problems, and they did everything to hide that fact and cover it up. So it's all. And then a few years back, Brian Hooker, a father of a child damaged by vaccines, did the same thing. He went through Freedom of Information Act, which isn't free, by the way, because in order to get all the information that he needed to prove that this was going on, he had to use, he was blocked from getting so much information. So once somebody goes through Freedom of Information, that person then can only get so much information before they stop, before that person gets blocked from getting information, and then they have to go through other channels if they want more. So in other words, they have to use another person's name, or so on and so forth. So he did that. He accumulated all this information by getting family members and other people, friends and things like that, involved, so that he could pull enough information out to find out that, yes, there was a cover-up, and they were covering up mercury in the vaccines being used, and they were causing all this neurological damage. So that was all out there, right? And so Kennedy, so my point about Kennedy he's done extensive research into vaccines since at least 2005. So when Tucker Carlson asks him whether or not vaccines need to be mandated because of herd immunity, his answer should be herd immunity is a hoax. It is not a real thing. Because for one, you're taking a huge liberty that all these vaccines work. So then he starts talking about the pertussis vaccine. Everybody knows pertussis vaccine doesn't work like at all, like not even a little bit. They can't even try to pretend like it works. So he brings up pertussis and says that, this isn't necessary, and he brings up hepatitis B. Some of these things are not necessary. Some of these vaccines are not readily communicable diseases, but some of them are. And he uses the example, the measles. Okay? Well, we know that if you've done this kind of research, that when we had a so-called measles outbreak in California, it was one of the impetus that got them to increase the mandates in California. It was one of the things that they said they pointed to the measles outbreak and blamed it on the unvaccinated, though many of the people who had been diagnosed with the measles, and who knows if that diagnosis was even correct, by the way, it might not even be accurate, but the people that had been diagnosed with the measles, many of them had been vaccinated. So either the vaccine is a failure or it wasn't the measles. One of those has to be true, right? So the whole measles thing was a hoax, right? And so if you're pointing to that as the reason, those types of communicable diseases, that we need to still maintain herd immunity, so that there's some vaccines that are necessary, but maybe not all. So this is where he's kind of going, right? And he's pushing this sort of, not that we need to decrease vaccine mandates or we need to allow the public to do whatever the hell they want to do with their own bodies. He's saying we need to restore the public's faith in vaccination. In fact, Robert Kennedy attended the rally in California against the recent changes where they had, so basically if you're not aware, there is a mandate in California that you can only, in order to attend public school, a child can only receive a medical exemption from a doctor, stating that they have a medical reason to predispose them to not get the vaccine. So he attended the rally, and he didn't have a problem with the legislation. He never said he didn't support mandatory vaccination. What he said was, it's our responsibility to restore the faith, the public's faith in the program. So if you have a scientific-based medicine that is provable, faith is unnecessary. The burden of proof is on you to prove that it works. It either works or it does not. Faith is something that you give. Faith is a belief in something that cannot be verified. You have to just have faith. The science of vaccination is a religion because it cannot be verified. So belief in it is just that. It's just a belief. They've proven nothing. They've not proven safety. They've not proven efficacy. They've proven nothing. So if one wants to support that program, they can't find scientific data to do so. They have to have faith. So he's looking to restore the public's faith. So he's taking this middle ground of which, if you've done enough research, you know that there is no middle ground. There's only one ground. Right? Can they be proven to be safe and effective? Well, they haven't done it, they haven't been able to do it so far, right? And if we're just focusing on the toxins, I mean, look, there's toxins in these things that are illegal to have in your mattress, okay? So you think that they put those in there not knowing that people are going to have problems? Of course they do. And they're completely ignoring other things. They're ignoring the recombinant DNA, the foreign objects that they're putting in, from different body parts and pieces of insects and animals and human babies that have been aborted. Now, what are the effects of that? Well, they don't test for that, do they? They don't test for mutagenics. Why? Because they know that it causes mutagenics. They don't test for cancer. Why? Because they know it causes cancer. So, and why do they know that? Because everything they're putting in there is a carcinogen. And when they're putting foreign DNA into a body, it's something called insertational mutagenesis, meaning it will mutate your genes. Okay? They already know that. It's predetermined. So when they put it in, they don't take effect for it. So Kennedy's not talking about any of this. And he's not saying the big elephant in the room. Herd immunity is a hoax. There should be no reason for mandates. So Kennedy's agenda, and another thing, we had on my show, Truth or Talk, we had a guest on there by the name of Don Winkler. And at the Autism One conference, she asked him flat out if he supported one's right to choose to vaccinate. And he wouldn't answer the question. So he wouldn't answer whether or not he supports vaccine. From what I can see, he does. He believes in vaccine mandates. He just thinks that maybe they can scale them back a little, maybe they can green them, maybe they can make them a little bit safer. But the point is, if you have your right to choose, then it's not, you know, the safety of them isn't as relevant at that point, right? Because as soon as people start making their own decisions about it, and they stop falling into victim to this hoax, and they don't feel like they're forced to by the government, then guess what? We're going to start to realize we don't need them. So mandates are what keep this system alive. That's what keeps us from figuring out that it's bullshit. So that's what Kennedy's all about. So this is why I don't trust Kennedy. And I'm not going to support, you know, Robert Kennedy Jr. I mean, all he's got to do is say that the public should not be forced to have them. That's all he's got to say. But he hasn't said that. So let's wait. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening.